Dobro. History. Archive.
All right, today we're going to dive into a really bizarre murder from 1998. And we're going to use it to understand this incredibly intense moment in South Korean history. It's a story where one single shocking crime scene tells you everything about the psychological fractures of an entire nation. So let's get into it. I want to start with a question for you. What does a national bankruptcy actually look like? You know, it's so easy to picture it with charts and graphs, but what's the human image? What does it look like on the ground for the people who are actually living through it? Well, sometimes it looks like this. A man found in the ashes of a burned-down video store, completely encased in packing tape, like some kind of modern mummy. This one horrifying image from 1998, that's our way into a much, much bigger story. See, this crime, which the media called the mummy tape mystery, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. To really get it, we have to go back in time, to the world it came from. In South Korea, they call it the IMF era, and it was a time when a national dream just spectacularly fell apart. This is the number that basically defined that whole period. In December of '97, South Korea was on the brink of total collapse. To avoid it, they had to accept this record-breaking $58.5 billion bailout from the IMF. It was a lifeline, for sure, but man, did it come with a price. And that price, it was psychological. For decades, the country had been riding high on something called the Han River miracle. It was this incredible story of economic growth that came with a powerful social promise, the idea of lifetime employment. You get a good job, you're set for life. The IMF's harsh rules shattered that promise, like overnight. All that optimism was just gone, replaced by this deep collective trauma. And this chart, wow. It just shows you how fast and how hard everything fell apart. I mean, look at that. In just 2 years, the country went from a really healthy 7% growth to negative 5%. Can you even imagine the shockwaves that sent through every single part of society? Okay, but here's where it gets really real. This table connects those big abstract economic numbers to what was actually happening to people. You see interest rates skyrocket to 30%. That meant personal debt pretty much became a death sentence. That whole idea of lifetime employment, gone, replaced by massive layoffs. This wasn't just some recession. It was a crisis that was breeding despair everywhere. All right, so we've seen the big picture. Now let's zoom in, way in. Let's see how this huge national crisis becomes a deeply personal one. Because the weight of this collapse, it didn't fall on everyone equally. For a lot of young men, like the killer in our story, Mr. Kim, it became this unbearable burden of debt and shame. And you have to understand this next part. This quote, it says it all. The financial crisis set off this massive crisis of masculinity. Think about it. An entire generation of men was raised to believe their entire value as a person came from their ability to provide for a family. Suddenly being jobless and deep in debt, that wasn't just a money problem. It felt like their whole identity was being erased. So in this bleak new world, where could you possibly go to escape? Well, for a lot of people, you went to the video store. Back in the 90s, these places were everything. They were community centers. They were your main source of entertainment, these little gateways to other worlds. They were also small, intimate, enclosed spaces, which, as it turns out, was the perfect pressure cooker for what was about to happen. And here's the really dark twist. The very things that defined this place of escape, the movies, the shelves, and especially the endless rolls of packing tape they used to fix the broken VHS cases, they were about to be used in a truly horrific ritual. Okay, so we've got the pressure cooker of society, and we've got the intense personal shame. Now, let's step inside that video store and piece together what happened on the night of March 2nd, 1998. So, the night starts with a conversation about money that goes bad. Then, around 3 in the morning, the debtor, Mr. Kim, kills his creditor, the store owner, Mr. Sun. But he doesn't just run. What comes next is this prolonged, incredibly bizarre ritual. And that is followed by a cold, rational attempt to burn down all the evidence, which ultimately leads to the discovery. So you might be wondering, what could possibly set off that level of violence? Profilers think it comes down to this concept: narcissistic injury. For Mr. Kim, who already felt completely worthless because of his debt, a simple insult from his creditor about that debt, well, that could have been the tiny spark that lit the fuse on an explosion of rage. But the rage didn't just stop with the murder. What he did next is what makes this case so haunting. First, the binding. He wrapped the body from head to toe in packing tape. Psychologists see that as an act of depersonalization, of trying to literally erase the victim. But then, there's the arson. A totally cold, calculated move to destroy evidence. And that rational act just completely contradicts the supposed madness of the wrapping. And that contradiction, the bizarre, ritualistic wrapping versus the totally logical cover-up, that brings us to the most famous part of this whole case, the suspect's defense. It turned what should have been a straightforward murder investigation into this fascinating and really disturbing psychiatric puzzle. So the police and the courts were left with this unbelievable question. Who was actually responsible here? Was it Mr. Kim, the 20-something guy crushed by debt, or was it, as he claimed, his 120-year-old alter ego, a personality he called Shadow? So which was it? On one hand, you've got the argument for a genuine dissociative identity disorder. Maybe the extreme stress of the crisis literally fractured his mind, creating this aggressive alter ego to handle all the shame he couldn't. But the argument that he was just faking it, malingering, is really strong too. I mean, the details of his story sound like they were pulled right out of movie plots, and having an alter ego gives you a pretty convenient excuse to do terrible things without feeling guilty. The profilers on the case came up with this killer question that just cuts right to the heart of it all. See, part of Kim's alibi was that his alter ego Shadow thought he was just an actor filming a movie scene. Okay, but if that were true, why would you then try to burn down the movie set? The arson is the smoking gun of rationality. It suggests he knew exactly what he did was real. Okay, so let's pull back. After all of this, what are we left with? What is the legacy of this strange and tragic case? Why does this ghost of 1998 still kind of haunt us? And what does it tell us about the deep connections between the economy, our culture, and our own minds? So let's just recap the key elements real quick. You have the mummy wrap, a clear act of control and depersonalization. You've got the shadow persona, a very convenient alibi. You've got the arson, a totally rational cover-up, and the whole movie delusion, which just blurs the line between fiction and reality. So why do people still study this case? Because it leaves us with three really powerful and kind of disturbing insights. First, that mummy becomes a symbol for economic silencing. He's literally binding the creditor who represented all his financial shame. Second, it's an early example of the gamification of violence, where the lines between media and reality get dangerously blurry. And finally, it actually forced Korean criminology to create a whole new profile, the mixed offender, for criminals who are both organized and disorganized, both rational and bizarre. In the end, what the mummy tape mystery really is this chilling reminder that massive economic crises are never just about numbers on a spreadsheet. They are profound psychological events. They are traumas that can push people right to the edge, creating real monsters out of anxiety and fracturing minds just as easily as they fracture markets.